I think there's definitely got to be some divorces that have been over things like the way that one of them slurps their tea. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I swear to God. But the thing is, right, when you're in a relationship, there's all these things that if you explained it to someone else, you'd sound like a fucking lunatic.
I remember that time that I was on holiday with my grandparents and my mum, and she pulled me to a side a couple of days after, like, into the holiday and said, "Your gran, I can just hear every mouthful." She was like, "I can even hear her eating her yogurt from a spoon."
It is, and like it's these things that like they really fuck you up, like they annoy you so much, but then as soon as you voice them, they become insanity. It once they're thoughts in your head that make you like fucking grit your teeth. But as soon as you give voice to them, you realise you sound insane. Or like, have you ever been that? I've done this with you. You've been that point of annoyed where you can't even articulate it, and you're just like, you're just fucking, and you do. It's so fucking bad.
I do feel like it's irrational, the slurping thing, though.
It's a horrible noise.
It's part of me enjoying my cup of tea, and that's
slurp.
a simple thing for me to enjoy in our lives right now, and you can't even let me slurp and enjoy my tea.
It's really annoying because slurping by itself is not an indication of enjoyment. It's just you not knowing how to use your own fucking lips properly.
No, it isn't. It's because I like to drink the tea when it's hot.
That's you telling the world, I don't know how to use a cup. Yeah, like that. You sound like a fucking idiot. Stop it. I swear I'm so easily wound up these last couple of weeks.
Do you need some lip balm?
Maybe. I don't know. My lips are quite dry. I've got my
They're chapped.
Chat, right, I am. So, hello, welcome back to the podcast. It's a Drunk History of Middle-earth. We talk about Tolkien in a relaxed, accessible way to make sure that everybody can understand it and we all have a good time, right? So I'm Chris and I'm joined by Rebecca, my wife. Now, I'm also fundraising for a half marathon that I'm running in September for guide dogs. And part of that is I'm doing a lot of running. Now, as part of this as well is I'm a big boy, right? I'm a big lad and I'm losing weight while I'm running and what have you. However, some of the dark sides of running that fat people have to deal with, because they always say to fat people, like, the thing I hate about fat people, right, is when you see fat people on the telly, they're always the most useless cunts. They purposefully put the biggest fucking, literally the biggest idiots on telly.
Yeah.
So like you don't really see representation of fat people like me who do a lot of exercise but just eat like, like it's the diet that lets them down. But anyway, right. So one of the downsides of being a fat runner is I've been doing a lot of miles with my plan, right? And it's up in each week. And because of that, I got something that I've never had before in my life, which is chapped arse cheeks. I was showing Becca the other day, so it was after one of it was my 5 mile run. I ran to work. It was a 5 mile run.
You were doing like the Salt Bay arching of the back.
When I was trying to show
me.
Yeah. It's because my ass was proper stinging. Like it was just if you imagine like the tip of your ass cheeks where they just meet the outside world. And where they could just run together if you've got a bit of cake.
Do you think that's what Gimli felt like throughout the whole journey?
That's it, yeah. When he was saying, he's saying like cross country's wasted on me.
Because he runs like you.
He's saying we're dangerous over short distances, yeah. It's because you get chapped arse cheeks otherwise. You can't fight as well if you've got chapped arse cheeks. So yeah, it felt like my arse cheeks were like rubbing lips against each other. And it really fucking stung because by the time I got home, like I'd been travelling loads of the day as well. Like, so the day that I do 5 miles, by the time I get home, I'm doing like 19,000 steps. Like, so it's pretty significant for being a fatty. Anyway, do you know the thing is, right? We've led with that. This is actually one of the most interesting topics that I think we've covered on this podcast so far.
So just stick with it.
Yeah, please. No, so if you're interested in supporting me, please do. There'll be a link in the bio for this episode, and if you come speak to us on Instagram, I run the account. You see me shit posting memes. I also drop. I've affectionately titled it "Tubby Training Tolkien Talks," where every time I finish a run, I'll upload a video. So I did park run this morning with a couple of our neighbours. And as I was walking back to the car, I did one about just a quick video about the origin of trolls, about how some of the Maya might have shagged orcs for it. And anyway, if you want to donate, please come and get involved. We've also got a couple of events coming up to be announced. I'm going to do, sometime in April, I'm going to do a charity live stream where I'll be playing games on Twitch, Lord of the Rings games, and talking about the lore, and I'm going to do 12 hours, so probably from, let's say, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So we'll just have the crack there, so come along and join me, but keep an eye on the Instagram for that. And yeah, like I said, there's links in our bio for the fundraiser where you can see my progress, because my runs, after every run, it uploads automatically just given, so you see that I'm putting the work in, which I think is quite nice. Anyway, right, today, Rebecca, we're going to talk about, like I said, I think it's one of the most fascinating subjects, and it's really split into two parts. We're going to look at the origin of humans within Tolkien, but the tale of two parts is you've got the first bit, which is a little section in the Silmarillion, and then you've got the second section, which is contained within an unpublished work, but it contains one of the most interesting stories. So for me, it's a shame that it was unpublished. And it's a bit of the lore that I refer to quite a lot when you talk about certain aspects of like elves and humans, because it's all, the work is a conversation. It's an essay that is essentially writing out a conversation between two people, and it's just, chef's kiss. It's beautiful. So, but before we start, I want to set the stage for you on a cosmological sort of bent. What do you remember about humans cosmologically within Tolkien? Like, so if I was to say to you that the gift of Ilúvatar, could you remember what that is for humans?
That they can die and go to heaven, like a heaven.
Yeah, they can leave. They can leave Arda, the circles of the world, completely, and they can rejoin Eru. And can you remember what it's actually called? The something halls.
Nah.
It's the timeless. It's all right. No,
timeless halls.
It's the timeless halls. You did really good though. I'm really pleased you remembered that.
I just couldn't get the halls of Mandos out my head.
Yeah, no, it's the same. Well, yeah, I can understand.
So many halls.
Aye, humans get halls. Dwarves get halls. Maybe. Well, I think
dragons live in halls that they've stolen.
Yeah, so you've got the halls of Mandos, and then you've got the timeless halls where humans go, which is just class. And yeah, so on a cosmological scale, Eru gave humans two gifts. The first is the ability to die, which will come up quite a lot in this episode because humans seem to have... The message got lost a little bit somewhere along the way, and that comes up, which is interesting. And the second one is the ability to act outside of the music of the Ainur. So do you remember all the way back in our episode about creation?
Yeah.
And the Ainu Lindale? And that was when they basically set out the plan for the music, set out the plan for life. They set out the plan for life in Arda, right? Humans can act outside of that plan, which elves can't. So it's described as, to everything else that is fate, it's more of a suggestion, pretty much, for humans. Now, I'm not going to go too much into it because this is then quite a common refutation of saying that, well, humans have free will in Tolkien. I don't think they do. And I still don't think that gift of Eru proves that humans have free will either.
But that's for another discussion.
That is very much for another discussion, and that is for a discussion that I have had for months and months and months in different formats that I would like to put out in a better way at some point, but we'll get there. So the humans, for anyone who doesn't know, in Tolkien, are the second children of God. They are the second children of Eru Ilúvatar. The elves are the firstborn. The dwarves are his adopted kids, but the humans are his second children. And the elves refer to us as that. They call us like the aftercomers, the guests, the followers, like basically everything about like come second. And the original plan, it said, was that humans would be guided by elves. they would absorb all the knowledge of elves, that they would prepare the way for us, and then like we'd become like great and mighty, and like the world would be ours, and elves would eventually fade and what have you. Didn't quite work out just like that. Things don't go to plan, which you'll see, which you will have seen. It's a bit of a running theme, isn't it?
Make plans and God laughs.
Yeah, well, that's a good saying.
God make plans and the dwarves and humans laugh.
Aye, so yeah, humans have two gifts. First one is the ability to die. Second one is the ability to act outside of the music of the Ainur, which sets out what should happen. And there's a concept here that I want to drill down on between humans and elves, and we've mentioned it in other episodes. Elves are immortal, humans are eternal. Elves will last until the end of time. Humans are outside of time. Which I love bringing that up because I just think it's such a fascinating concept to think about. That is the kind of concept where you would see a stoner in a film.
Yeah,
talking
man.
about it, yeah, like, oh yeah. So yeah, anyway, right, so humans and elves don't go to the same place when they die, as we've discovered. Elves will stay within Arda right up until the end of time. After that, who knows what happens to them? Nobody knows. They might rejoin humans, or they might not. They might just cease to exist. Humans go and be with Eru. So now that we understand where they are on the cosmic stage, let's have a look at their history and how they first became corrupted by Morgoth. And this is done in the ancient... this is revealed in what's called the Tale of Adanel, which is a human myth passed down through history. But before that, we'll have a look at what's in the published Silmarillion. And there'll be a couple of names, but we're not going to go too deep into the language because there's not a great deal of it there. And plus, I think we've done so much language in previous episodes, you kind of get the general gist of the way language works. And
I've got a question.
Go on then, yeah.
How was these stories passed down? Was it orally?
Yes.
Okay.
And then written down by...
Who wrote in Tolkien's universe? Who could...
Bilbo Baggins.
He was the only person who could write?
No, lots of people wrote. No. Rumil invented the first alphabet. Then Feanor improved upon it. He invented what we know as the writing system of Tengwar, which is still used in the Third Age by Bilbo, for example. But the tale of the Athrobeth Finrod a Andreth, which is where the Tale of Adanel is recorded, is an in-universe text that Bilbo Baggins records at Rivendell.
Okay.
But there is other writers, yeah. The Tale of Adanel was passed down orally,
right,
for generations. But yeah, there are people who write. There is lots of writers.
I'm just trying to
the
place it into some sort of concept of our time. Is it like the medieval period where certain people could write, usually influential or higher up people?
So this point of the humans, where this tale is had, this tale comes from a conversation that was had during the First Age, but it's talking essentially about the humans' prehistory. So we'll get there and you'll see what I mean, but we're essentially... And it doesn't really obey the rules of Tolkien's normal writing.
Okay.
And we'll get there, but it is essentially a condensed retelling of a myth, which is interesting. So, but we'll go for what's in the recorded Silmarillion first. So, humans first appear in recorded history in Beleriand during the days of the Long Peace. The Long Peace is when Morgoth was in Angband. And do you remember me... I think... what episode was it? I can't remember what episode it was, but I did remember telling you about Morgoth overextended himself at one point, and he underestimated the Noldor, and they chased him back to Angband.
Yeah.
And it was during our Angband episode, actually. And it was during that the Noldor were able to essentially gather outside the gates of Angband and keep him in there for 400 years. It was called the Siege of Angband. And it was also called the Long Peace because he tried once to get out, with Glaurung come out before he was ready, and he got chased away. So within this long kind of... Well, to humans, it's the Long Peace. This is when the humans first appear in Beleriand. It's not when they first woke up, but it's when they first come into the Silmarillion. And this is about 300 years after the sun first rises. So remember in our Noldor episode, the minute that they step foot, the minute that Fingolfin first steps foot, I think it's Fingolfin, first steps foot into Middle Earth off the Helcaraxi is when the moon rises.
Okay.
Do you remember that from our Noldor episode? And then 7 days later, the sun rises. So it's that 7 days later is when humans first wake up. And it's because the moon was there first. That's why elves, they love the moon and the stars. But then orcs fear the sun. So, they both serve their purpose. So about 300 years after the sun first rises, the humans come to Beleriand. And that's where they enter into the story. And they are discovered by one Finrod Felagund, who is one of the coolest elves to ever live, right? He is a Noldor elf. He is Galadriel's brother. I think he's her older brother. He's the Lord of Nargothrond, which is a great stronghold, which is built into the caverns next to the River Narog. And it's about 300 years since Feanor's died, and Finrod has been out hunting with some of Feanor's sons, and he's like, at one point, he's like, do you know what, lads, I'm just going to take some time by myself, and he goes off travelling. And so Finrod Finrod also is very notable for later on in the history of humans, because he plays a very big part in the tale of Beren and Luthien, and he is renowned as the only known Elvish battle rapper.
I thought you were going to say, like, the only known Elvish third wheel.
To who? Oh, to Beren and Luthien. Oh, arguably.
I just thought there was going to be, like, a love triangle or something, like, exciting like that.
Nah. One of Feanor's sons tries to forcefully marry her, which is pretty fucked up.
Right.
But
you've got my interest.
Beren and Luthien's an amazing tale. But no, Finrod is the only known Elvish battle rapper, and he battles Sauron using songs of magic, which is unreal. And you'll have heard the actual songs because it's on Clamavi de Profundis on the Lord of the Rings sleep playlist I've made. So you will have heard it. Like, if we have, by the time we come to cover it on the podcast, you'll
I'll have
know.
been brainwashed.
You'll know, yeah. So anyway, Finrod travels east and south from where he is. And then he eventually comes into Assyriand, which is where the Green Elves live. And he thinks something's very wrong because he hears singing at night, and he can see firelight, and this is two things he knows the Green Elves do not do. They don't tend to light fires, and they don't sing at night time. It's not really their jam. And at first he thinks it's orcs, and naturally he wouldn't. I can imagine there's a big sinking feeling because you think, fuck, is this like an army come to relieve Angband? Like, oh shit. So he investigates, and when he gets closer he realises that it's something a bit really weird, because this isn't a language he's ever heard before. It's not Orcish, it's not Dwarvish, it's not even Elvish. Like, it's nothing like he's heard before. So he follows... he looks closer and he watches from the trees. And he sees some strangers. And these strangers are following a man who calls himself Beor the Old, who's a chief of the men. And it said that they had wandered for many of their lifetimes through the world, but now, when Finrod finds them, they're celebrating because they've made it to the other side of the mountains, and in their eyes, they've made it to their promised land. Like, this is the land they were seeking, they think is free of fear and free of trouble.
Punk-ass bitches.
Yeah, they weren't right. They weren't quite right there, which is a shame. And as Finrod watches them, he feels love, a great love stirring within him. And he waits for them all to fall asleep.
In his loins.
No, not in his loins.
He waits for them all to go to sleep.
No, don't make it like that. Not Finrod. No, he's a good guy.
Why do you think he's called Finrod?
No. You're horrible. No. So when right, oh my god. So these strangers, they don't set any guards around their camp. So when they're all asleep, Finrod walks in and he picks up a harp that Beor has laid, and he sits beside their dying fire, and he starts to play music. And it's beautiful music that these humans have never heard before. And they all wake up, but they don't do anything because It's such beautiful music. They think that they're dreaming. All of them think they're dreaming. And I can't overstate how unprepared the humans were to meet an elf like Finrod. And I know we say this a lot, like it's quite it seems almost academic, like we say, like, oh, you've got the Calaquendi and the Morroquendi, like you've seen elves who've seen the trees and elves who haven't seen the trees. This really shows just how significant that is, because the difference between, at this point in Middle-earth's history, right, in Beleriand and what have you, the difference between an elf who has lived in Valinor, like Finrod, and one of the Avari who didn't go on the Great Journey is it's pretty much the difference between modern humans and cavemen. Like it's that big of a difference in everything, like learning, like all sorts. So these humans had met some of the Avari before, like, and if you aren't sure who the Avari are, go back and listen to our episode on the origin of elves and what have you, when we go into the different groups of elves. But Avari are the ones who didn't want to go to Valinor in the beginning, right? So
he's almost like blessed. He's being touched.
He is so impressive to them that they think he is one of the Valar that they've heard rumors about. Like they think
like
he's a
saint.
They think he's a god.
Oh, right. Okay.
They think he's one of the little g gods. So and that's how stark the difference is. So Finrod starts playing music and they all think they're dreaming because it's so beautiful. They've met elves like the Avari and the Nandor before, but again, like I said, not in the same league of the type of being you're meeting. And we know from my bizarre research the other week that, of course, they're much more advanced because the Avari elves didn't learn how to make wine until much, much later than the elves who had seen Valinor. That is a fact that will forever be stuck in my fucking brain. And I can't get rid of it. Anyway, right. So everyone who listened to Finrod sing, because he started to play music, then when they all woke up and they were listening, then he started to sing. Everyone who listened to him became wiser and better for him, for this, because he sang to them about all of the history up until that point. And it's the exact writing in the Silmarillion is that he sang about the making of Arda and the bliss of Aman beyond the shadows of the sea, right? But I took this to be shorthand for he told them about the Ainu Lindale up until current times, like as a catch-up session with music. So after listening to this, the humans forever after would call Finrod Nom, which means wisdom. And this is where did you know that Tolkien was a philologist? Because this is where it comes through as well.
Oh.
Finrod was able to easily learn their language. Finrod was easily able to learn the language of the humans because these humans, like I mentioned, had dealt with the Avari before they got into Beleriand, and all elves have a common language, which is primitive Quendian. So tracing his way back, he was able to find words they had in common and then very quickly learn their language and be able to talk to them. So again,
what a show off.
Well, again, it's part of that as well. As like, is that also because he lived in Valinor? Like they're able to do that because it says in the Silmarillion that he was able to read their thoughts. Like, so even though they were speaking languages you couldn't understand, he could still quite kind of understand their meaning.
Mm.
And anyway, they started to talk, and they could very quickly. They start to have a conversation. And Finrod talks with Beor, who's the leader, and he asks him, like, what are you up to? Where are you from? What are you doing? And Beor either can't tell him very much or won't tell him very much about where they came from. So he said that his ancestors told few tales of their past and that a silence had fallen on their memory, which is a bit dodgy, whatever that means. But all Beor would say is that they thought that their best hope lay in coming to the west to seek light, and that they turned their backs on the darkness that lay behind them in the east. And this is fascinating, right? Because we don't get much more. I'll show you. I'm going to say a little bit, but after this, we don't get a great deal more in the published Silmarillion. That's kind of like there's some speculation that this is Morgoth, but in the published Silmarillion, there's not a great deal more than this. But Beor does say that there's more men coming to Beleriand, and they're just the first group. So we would see 2 other groups arrive afterwards, and collectively, you'll have heard this term before, these 3 tribes become known as the Edain.
Ah, yeah.
So it's the Sindarin word for, like, humans.
Okay.
But specifically, these 3 tribes of humans. Because after so every human after this we deal with in all of Tolkien's works descended from these 3 groups. So the other 2 groups are called the House of Haleth and the House of Hador. And again, every famous human comes from one or more of these 3 houses because, like, there's interconnected, like, marriage and what have you. And their first proper home, I wanted to include this bit because I found it a bit funny. They start, like, celebrating, like, hey, we found our home. And the Green Elves say to Finrod, like, because they're in Osiriand, which is the Green Elves' home, and they're like, you better fucking move them, because they've been cutting down the fucking trees and hunting the animals. We are going to fuck them up if you do not get rid of them. So Finrod's like, right, everybody, come on, pack up. So he takes them to...
chop chop.
Yeah, he takes them to a place...
No, don't chop chop.
Oh yeah, don't chop chop. Nonetheless, they will have need of wood. He takes them to a place near Doriath called Estalad, and it's one of the Sons of Feanor's territories, and they don't pay really much attention to them anyway. But that's where their first real home is Estalad, which means the encampment.
Okay.
And that's where humans first properly live in Beleriand, even though, like, they stopped in Osiriand for a bit. But whoops. So, and the last bit you get in the Silmarillion is that the elves learn later that as soon as humans woke up in Hildorian, which is a place far, far to the east of Middle-earth. So, you know, Cuivanen was right in the east.
Mm-hmm.
Hildorian's even further east.
Okay.
We speculate, I think, that Cuivanen was on the shores of... Is it the Sea of Rune? Or the inland Hellcar? Anyway, it's on the shore of some inland sea. Hildorian was on the shores of the other sea, the other side of the fucking world. And we don't get much information on it, about where Hildorian really was. But on a very, very, very early map of Arda that Tolkien wrote, a symmetrical Arda, do you know, before Morgoth fucked it up with the lamps? Hildorian is on that map, and it's labelled right in the far east. And the word Hildorian means land of the followers in Quenya. Like I mentioned, it's because they call us the followers.
Yeah.
The guests, blah, blah, blah. There's also early references to it being surrounded by the mountains of the wind, but that doesn't really appear anymore. And I was like, what the fuck? And it was called that because of strong winds that would hit the mountains from the sea.
All right, okay.
Which kind of
that
makes
sense.
Yeah, but do you know what it made me think of? It made me think of, like, a Chinese bamboo forest or something. Like, I don't know why. Like, just some, like, really...
Mountains of the wind power.
Yeah, do you know, some, like, some, like, ancient Chinese, like, Orient mythological mountains. I don't know why.
Especially because our east is hot.
Yeah?
Yeah, you do think about, like, the sea, heat, humidity, jungle, like...
I'm imagining... See, that's so weird. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere, but I thought jungle as well.
But when you've been talking, I've been thinking, oh, I wonder what the climate's like in these areas. I mean, it's a world that's quite, like, there's certain parallels, but was it similar meteorologically to our world?
We don't get enough, so there will be... Oh, in fact, you know, right, there's someone who joined the book club who's got a podcast all about geology called Geology on the Rocks, and he's done an episode about Middle-earth. So I'll ask him. I'll say, like, if you had mountains next to the sea and there were strong winds coming off the sea, what would the climate be like? But then also, I watched a video the other day. Do you know? Is it Snowdon that's in Wales? Our mountain in the UK? I watched a video about someone saying, like, oh, I got up early to go climb Snowdon, and then to watch the sunrise, and then they sort of, like, the just fog everywhere. And one of the comments said, if you see that there's wind coming from the southeast, don't even bother because it brings it all in off the sea. I think it was something like that. So I'm going to ask that. I'm going to ask, that is a geology question. If there's any geologists who listen, I know that guy actually does listen to the podcast as well, so I'll ask him.
Is it not meteorology?
It's just weather, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we're talking about the climate. So the land would affect the climate, wouldn't it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Do I need to speak to a geologist or a meteorologist? What about a Scientologist? Will they be able to help me?
What about
Egyptologists?
a Mormon?
Mormologists?
A mormologist.
We need, right, no, so if you are of the scientific persuasion, and I don't know why you listen to this podcast, but if you are listening to this podcast, tell us, right, so what we've got is a land surrounded by mountains on the shores of the sea, nearly, that this mountains has east. I'm going to assume it's east to west, strong east to west winds. What would the climate be like? And I think it's fairly equatorial, based on the old map. But I don't know if the equator really counts. Oh no, wait, no, Middle Earth's in the north of the world, isn't it? So it's probably not equatorial.
I'm just kind of thinking there could be a potential. Well, there's a potential that it's very close to our world, purely because of when the elves were going north, they hit that band of ice.
But the world changes. The world changes between Hildorian, because the War of Wrath messes things up. Then you've got the fall of Numenor in the Second Age, which changes the shape of the world again. So I don't know if we can really make a call on that. But
anyway,
we
digest.
Yeah, we digest. Sorry. Right. So, in early versions of the Legendarium, Hildorian is also called the Vale of Sleep, or the Vale of Mermenalda, or the Slumberous Dales.
Oh, that sounds like somewhere I would live.
Yeah, and it's said that it's full of nice smells.
Yeah.
And has a beauty similar to that of Valinor. So that for me is 99.999% just proper Garden of Eden vibes.
Yeah, that's
that's straight Garden of Eden, right?
My place.
And in these early versions of the Legendarium, an elf called Nuin finds his way through the mountains because it's just like Gondolin is protected by almost impenetrable mountains. So is the Slumberous Dale. But he finds his way through eventually, and he sees that it's filled with pairs of figures that are all asleep. And he watches them for ages, and they don't stir, they don't wake up, until eventually his curiosity overcomes him, and he wakes up the first pair. And I just think that's absolutely fascinating. Like, it's just straight, you can see straight away that there's pairs of sleeping figures being woken one by one. Like, we see that again with the origin of the elves. So you wonder how much did Tolkien just kind of cross over and lift and shift onto his other works, or like move things around, like the pieces of the mythology. Anyway, so elves learn that as soon as the humans walk in Hildorian, Morgoth had spies watching, ready to muck it all up. So Hildorian, we see that as soon as they do wake up, Morgoth leaves Angband. He goes to see them, and So anyway, blah, blah, blah. So maybe the homeland is still there, somewhere out there in the east, but I doubt it because the world's changed, which we said. And then back to the humans in Beleriand. They said they were like fleeing, that they'd turned their back on the darkness in the east, so what were they fleeing, right? We could probably guess that it is Morgoth. And elvish lore or legends or myth makes reference to a shadow lying on the hearts of men, similar to the shadow that lies on the Noldor, due to the kinslayings and the doom of Mandos.
Okay. So
it seems like they've got something burdening them, same as the Noldor do. And they think the shadow is because of Morgoth, and they're right. Yeah, they are right. And it says that Morgoth desired to destroy or corrupt whatever arose in Arda, so that's where he's different to Sauron. Sauron wants to dominate and order things. Morgoth wants to corrupt and destroy. So when he heard about men waking up, he leaves Sauron in charge of Angband and goes to Hildorian. And it said that his possible goal was to corrupt humans into being the enemies of elves, so he could bring them to Beleriand as an army. But that would have been slow to come to fruition because you would have had to corrupt the whole race.
Yeah.
And it was never fully achieved because at least 3 tribes of them made it there uncorrupted, which is good. So that's the end of the published Silmarillion. That's the end of the published kind of this is what we really know type stuff. Now we're going to go into the unpublished stuff. Is there anything that you're having an issue with so far?
No, that seems very straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I find it, like I said, I find it absolutely fascinating. But that isn't what I consider the most fascinating part. This bit is. So we come away from the Silmarillion, and as I mentioned, there's an essay called Athrobeth Finrod a Andreth. Just a conversation between the very same Finrod we were talking about, but this is after the elves, after the humans have settled in Beleriand, and a human wise woman called Andreth. And there is another human wise woman called Adanel, who's referred to as well, hence the Tale of Adanel. So in this essay, Finrod and Andreth, they discuss the difference between elves and humans, the nature of death for both of them, what they believe about Eru and Morgoth, and some of the grievances that humans seem to have with like their lot in life. It's an absolutely fascinating essay. It really is. Every time I read it, I come away with something new, and I honestly cannot overstate that. If you're even a little bit curious, go and read this yourself. It's fantastic. It's in volume 10 of History of Middle-earth, which is called Morgoth's Ring. Don't you smirk at me like that. I see you over there.
Is he chopped as well?
He has not. I don't know. Yeah. If I could ask Tolkien one question, did Morgoth have a chapped ring? So, Andreth learned stories from Adanel. So I think she was like a fucking auntie or something. It's crazy how it actually details how Andreth and Adanel were related, and I was just looking at it and I was like, nah, fuck that. But what's unusual for Tolkien in the writing is that it's not proper recorded history. It is, the Tale of Adanel is a footnote in this unpublished essay that is a fictional recording of a conversation. It's very far away from like, this is history, this is what happened. This is full of speculation. It's full of like the fallacies of being told from like a particular viewpoint. And it's just, it's crazy. It's proper jumbled up as well. So like the timelines are all condensed. Nobody really knows when it or how long it all took place over, you know. But before that, so one of the important things to come out with the Athrobeth, the whole conversation in general, is that humans believed amongst themselves that their lives humans weren't meant to die by nature. They thought that it wasn't natural for humans to die, which shows straight away that Morgoth really did get to them, because he has twisted one of the gifts of Iluvatar into something bad. So death wasn't to be seen as something to be scared of. It was to be welcomed. Like, you'd go and join Eru. You're free from the weariness of the world.
Yeah.
But Eru
It sounds so appealing.
It does, yeah. But Morgoth had twisted that so that humans were scared of death.
Yeah.
And then we see with the Númenóreans in the Second Age, it goes to the far end of a fart, because they have their whole fucking island destroyed because of their fear of death. They bring untold death and destruction upon themselves because of how desperate they are to not die. But there's an interesting point about Númenor I want to come on to at the end, which I think you'll really appreciate. So anyway, humans believe that they weren't meant to die, but they think that they're being punished, and they think Morgoth is the cause of it. It doesn't say that humans it doesn't say whether humans think Morgoth did it to them specifically, or whether it's because of Morgoth tainting the world or marring Arda that humans are short-lived, or whether it's a bit of both. Like, it doesn't say that. But from this belief, humans give Morgoth more power than he has, right? They put him and Eru on the same level of power.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Eru wouldn't be annoyed by that at all. I can't think of anything in the real world religions about false idols and jealous gods. Like, I'm pretty sure it'll be all okay, don't you? I think it'll be fine. I don't think Eru will be bothered by that, do you?
I know he's all-loving, all-powerful.
Well, yes, but both of these things can be true. So, So Andreth says that she thinks that since coming to Beleriand, humans are starting to live longer again, and that's because Morgoth is now confined to Angband in the north, whereas while the elves were living it up in Valinor, Morgoth had free reign over the whole of the world apart from Aman, which is it's horrible because it's caused the humans to become very bitter because they think they're missing out on what they think is their like rightful immortality.
Yeah.
When it's like, nah, you got to twist it a bit. That's not quite how it's meant to work. Which is weird because like, again, like it's the gift of Eru is being twisted. So Finrod asks her, why do you think that? And why humans have like passed that version of events down? And they seem to think in some way that they allude to that they think Morgoth is the true god but is evil, or is actually equal in power to Eru. And she says, still many men perceive the world only as a war between light and dark, equipotent. But you will say, nay, that is Manwë and Melkor. Eru is above them. Is then Eru only the greatest among the Valar? A great god among gods, as most men will say, even among the Etani? A king who dwells far from his kingdom and leaves lesser princes to do here much as they will? Which they go back and forth on the parts, so it's about the nature of Eru, like, well, just how powerful is Eru? Because Morgoth's very fucking powerful. And eventually they get to the story of the first humans, and she tells it to Finrod. And she said, so this is the story now of the very first humans. And she says that some humans believe Morgoth came so quickly after their awakening that none of them had died yet, which makes things very fucking difficult going forward, because now humans had not experienced death yet.
Yeah.
Which I imagine Morgoth was striking while the iron was hot there. So it all starts with humans waking up, right? And Eru speaks to them. God speaks directly to them in their hearts, and he's told the first humans, ye are my children. I have sent you to dwell here. In time ye will inherit all this earth, but first ye must be children and learn. Call on me and I shall hear, for I am watching over you. So even though they didn't have language yet, they understood this, and they wanted to talk back to him. So this sparked in their hearts the desire to make language. But it was slow. It's slow to make whole languages and words. And they asked Eru questions as often as they could. And what do you think Eru said back time and time again if they asked him questions and they wanted answers from him? What do you think his response would be?
I have no clue. You'll find out.
That's it. That's his answer. Is he would tell them, you need to figure it out for yourself, because that's where the fulfillment and the satisfaction comes from, is you learning. And if I gave you all the answers, you wouldn't have earned it, but you'd stop being children. You'd rush straight into being wise. And I stress, like you said, I stress, don't rush out of childhood. Enjoy it, so that when you do get to where you need to be, you'll appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah.
But humans being humans did exactly that. They wanted to make the world obey them, so they spoke to Eru less and less because he wouldn't give them the answers that they wanted. Then he appeared. See if you can figure it out when I give you the clues here. Someone who looked like them, but was far greater and more beautiful. He said he'd come out of pity, and that they shouldn't have been left alone. He offered the humans knowledge. He promised them food and clothes and riches and how to build houses and buildings. This stranger was dressed in silver and gold, with a crown on his head, with gems in his hair. He said that if they wanted to, he could teach them, and they took him on as a teacher. But he didn't teach them anything quickly. It was almost like he didn't want the humans to be doing things by themselves. Whenever they asked how to do something, he brought it to them, said it was a gift, saying the gift would remain as long as they trusted him. Who do you think that is so far?
An abuser.
That does sound very fucking abusive, actually. That's a very good point. Yeah, that does sound quite abusive. Who do you think this he is?
Morgoth.
Spot on.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. That's
exactly it. And so Morgoth's hold on the early humans deepened. They didn't want to go back to a life without his gifts because it seemed hard and brutal to have to struggle in the dirt. He told them that he came out of the dark and was a master of the world. Whenever someone raised objections, he'd just bring more gifts, right? And eventually, they told Morgoth about the voice of Eru. They didn't know he was called Eru, they just called it the voice. Morgoth became very, very angry when he heard this, and he said it was the voice of the dark behind the stars, the voice of the void, and that this voice hungered for humans. But Morgoth was very angry and he left after this for a long time. And without his gifts, they regressed in their lifestyle because they didn't know how to do anything by themselves. And one day, the sun began to fail and a great shadow fell across the world, and all the animals and the birds fled. They were scared. Morgoth came back to them then, when everyone was afraid, and he said that the dark was coming. That the dark was coming for them and it wanted them and it was going to eat them.
He's going to be the saviour.
And Morgoth could save them if... What do you think he's going to ask for? What do you think he wants from them?
Followers?
Yeah, you're right. Morgoth said, if you accept me as your lord, I'll save you. And all the humans were so scared, all of them. So they said, thou art the Lord, thee only we will serve. The voice we abjure, and will not hearken to it again. Once they said this, Morgoth commanded them to build a great house where they could come to him. And I think this is the first recorded temple in Arda. And as we see, temples do not have a good track record going forward. When it was done, he commanded that they all bow before him and acknowledge him. And when they did, he went up in a great flame and smoke and disappeared completely. Then the house became darker than night, and they fled from it in terror. And from then on, he didn't come very often anymore, and he commanded them to do... He rarely gave them gifts, and if they asked him for anything, he commanded them to do tasks or give gifts to him before he would hear their prayer, but it was never as good anymore. Eru spoke to humans once more, and that's the last time he spoke. In the dead of night, Eru spoke to them all, saying, Ye have abjured me, but ye remain mine. I gave you life, now it shall be shortened, and each of you in a little while shall come to me to learn who is your Lord, the one ye worship, or I who made him. So I don't know whether to interpret this as he was prophesying that their lives were now going to be shortened, or he made their life shorter because of this. But some of them had very, very drastically short lives, because some of them who heard this in the dead of night died of fright. Actually died of fright, right? And they're hearing this, and now that some of them have died, the humans panicked in terror. They ran to the temple. They wanted to hear Morgoth. They wanted Morgoth to save them from death.
Yeah,
like he said he could. Like he said, like if you believe in me, you'll live forever. So Morgoth, so that they believe that this was what Morgoth had said, that this was the voice behind the stars, that Eru's voice was actually the voice of the void and was evil. So they begged Morgoth for help to save them from death, and he came again, but this time he was cruel and he was proud. And he told them now that they were his and they would do his bidding. But he said that some of them had to die to feed the hunger of the void, and he didn't care, because otherwise they'd be like lice across the earth. They'd spread and they'd overpopulate. But he also threatened that if they didn't do what he said, a lot more of them would die, because now he'd kill them as well. So I think a lot of them realised just how deep of a shit they were in at that point. So it was after this point that humans believed that the world itself turned against them. They said that they became tired and sick and hungry, that animals fled from them or else hunted them if they could, that plants would poison them, that insects would bite them. So it's at this point...
So they're feeling sorry for themselves.
Oh, very, very fucking sorry for themselves. And they just wanted to go back to the way things were before. And they did whatever Morgoth said in the hopes that he would cure them of all their ailments. And he rewarded some of them, but Morgoth rewarded only the most cruel and the most evil of humans. And these cruel and most evil of humans, they began to enslave each other.
Mm.
So people then began to speak up and saying they realised now that the voice of Eru wasn't the enemy, but Morgoth was the enemy. However, anyone who said this openly was burned alive, and anyone who tried to run away was hunted down and then burned alive. And Morgoth...
which one shall I pick?
Morgoth, yeah. Morgoth really liked this. He really enjoyed this. And it said that everyone who did this and burned people for him, they did start to feel better for a while, which I imagine would cause a bit of a loop, which is a whoops. But some did escape, obviously. Some of them did escape. Some of them potentially wandered for perhaps 300 years through the world until eventually they got to a certain mountain. But it said in the tale of the people who stayed behind in the east that these who fled into other countries came at last to the shores, the western shores of the impassable waters, but that they never really escaped because, in fact, they then brought themselves right to the very country where Morgoth lived, which is a very dark way to look at things, that they think they've escaped fully from the shadow of Morgoth, only to discover that you've actually brought yourself to his fucking front door.
Yeah.
Which is... whoa. But that bit there is the main tale of Adanel, and that's the first fall of humans, the first the awakening of humans, and then the first fall of humanity where God stopped speaking to us.
Feels like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, so just enjoy yourself.
Yeah. It's interesting because
feels like that right now.
Yeah. That's the first fall of humanity. In the second age of Numenor, there's the second fall of humanity, and it almost word for word is that exact tale again. It's someone comes to Numenor, Sauron, declares that the true God comes from the darkness, Morgoth, that if you worship him, all your worries will go away. If you build a big fucking temple, he'll hear your prayers. If you sacrifice people to him, anybody who speaks out ends up being the ones who are sacrificed, except with the second fall of humanity, which is Numenor, Eru steps in this time, and he drowns Numenor, and he changes the world forever, so that you can't go across the sea to Aman anymore. Only elves can go on the straight road across the curved planet. I just think it's absolutely fascinating. But so something I wanted to talk about is just men's inherent sin, which seems to be hinted at quite a lot in these stories. I don't know about you, but did you get the sense there was like a big theme of like there's just something wrong with humans?
Not that there's something wrong, just that they don't have like the best deal. Well, they don't think that they've got the best deal. And they just they're chasing the American dream. They're chasing the human dream that they don't even know exists, but they're chasing that.
They always want what they don't have, right? Yeah, it's pretty much that. It's interesting. So I was looking up like sin, and I thought, is the tale of Adanel like the first fall of humanity? Is that our like the analog to, I know analogies and that, and Tolkien, but is it original sin within Tolkien? Like this is, so when the whole human race submitted to Morgoth, is that where original sin came from, and that everybody was stained with that forever after? Because we know that Arda is stained by Morgoth anyway, so having that shadow upon your heart of submitting to Morgoth, is that...
Like, you've got no chance to start with, so...
Yeah, well, yeah, like, is that the whole race, and it's hereditary, like, you're stained, like, the whole race is stained.
But the whole heart isn't stained.
No, no.
And those are the people that... Like, you've got, like, a good angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other.
Yeah, no, good shout. And in letter 131 to Milton Waldman, letter 131 is the fucking huge letter. In the section about Numenor, Tolkien says, the downfall is partly the result of an inner weakness in men, consequent, if you will, upon the first fall, unrecorded in these tales. That's the tale of Adanel, that's the first fall. So it's saying that inner weakness in men is consequence of the first fall. Repented, but not finally healed. Reward on earth is more dangerous for men than punishment. So I think what he's saying there is that, like, you know, men fell, or humanity fell the first time, and that made it possible that when they were given their chance at the end of the first age, the Edain who had escaped the first fall went on to form Numenor, and their descendants went for the second fall. Like, they just did that shit again, because once they'd fell once to Morgoth, they were easier. Well, not easier, but they did it again. Yeah, but for anyone who's... I had to look up for original sin because I wasn't exactly sure what it was. But original sin in Christianity is that it's when Adam and Eve disobey God in the Garden of Eden and eat the fruit. And apparently this is the first sin and has been passed on in a hereditary manner ever since. And it says the consequence for this was suffering, death, and a loss of God's friendship. Although, if we swap that back over to Middle-earth, the part about death not being natural seems like it would be propaganda by Morgoth. Because we know death is very, very natural, and that Eru always intended us to die. So I think... So death being a gift, as opposed to Catholicism, where death is... Well, Christianity, where death is a punishment. I think Tolkien just did a quick remix to Ignition, hot and fresh out the kitchen. But I want to finish on something which I think you'd like. And it's very personal to you, and I thought Becca's going to love this, right? So, humans are afraid of death in Tolkien, right? We've covered that loads today. Morgoth messed that up for everyone. In Numenor, when it starts to turn and they become worried about not being immortal. So the big thing about Numenor, by the way, is we'll cover Numenor as a subject like another time, but it gets to a point where they have longer lifespans. Right, that's what they wanted. They after the War of Wrath, they said, "Give us longer lifespans, but like we used to." When Eru said, "You're going to have shorter lifespans now."
Yeah.
At the end of the first age, as a reward for helping fight against Morgoth, they said, "Put our lifespans big again."
Yeah.
And they were like, and the Valar said, "Okay, but you're not immortal." Now, eventually, they wanted to be immortal again, and the kings of Numenor and the people of Numenor started to become obsessed with the idea of immortality, and they spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to think of ways to cheat death. And this, in Numenor, leads to the invention of embalming. That is a direct consequence. So it's in there's a passage in the Fall of Numenor where it talks about how they're so afraid of death that they raise great temples to the dead. And they learn how to preserve bodies in a way that they're untouched by death for like a long time. So I think that's a almost direct way of saying like they learn how to embalm because they're so scared of death. And I thought you'd appreciate that, given your line of work as a necrophiliac. No, she works in a funeral home, but she's not a necrophiliac. In fact, she demands I wriggle like a snake when we make love.
Christopher.
No, did you find that interesting though? I thought you would. That's where that there's an origin for embalming, is the way I see it within Tolkien.
Because decomposition isn't very pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and if you're terrified of dying and you see what actually happens once you do die, and that happens pretty quickly, then you may be even more afraid of death because you realise how final it is.
Yeah.
By embalming, you're prolonging at least the physical body that's left over.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. It's like they were trying to cheat death in whatever way they could. They were trying to extend their lives however they could, and that was one of the ways. But yeah,
Interesting.
I thought. But yeah, what did you think of today about hearing about the history of humans, the fall of humans?
Just
twice?
sounds really tragic.
It is. It's very tragic. But can you see why I find it one of the most fascinating parts of the story?
Yes, but it's very tragic and very sad.
Very, very tragic and very sad. Yeah, you're right.
It hasn't been a feel-good episode, let's just say.
No, but it's important. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Even though I do feel a bit chagrined that every time, I was saying this earlier, every time an elf farts, you get fucking reams of paper about it. But the entire origin of humans is a footnote in a recorded conversation in an unpublished essay.
Yeah.
Which is just like...
That shows how tragic
You
the human race is.
Yeah, well, it's just Tolkien showing his bias there, I think. Right, okay, well, that's. I think that's going to be it for us this week. So, like I mentioned, if you want to support us, if you want to support me training for my half marathon, come and give us a like on Instagram if you don't follow us already, share my posts, donate to the fundraiser if you can. Whatever you can spare. And if you're in the UK, please do gift aid it so that the charity gets more back. I've had confirmation from my place of work that up to £500 they will match my donation. So up to
Let's make them pay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fuck those rich motherfuckers. So within 6 months of completing the half marathon, I just need to submit a form at work with the Just Giving link, and they'll match the donation.
Nice.
Up to £500. So if I can raise £500, then Guide Dogs will get £1,000, which will be nice. So yes, if you could. Otherwise, come hang out with me on Instagram. Come talk to me. Give us a shout. I'm going to put some music back into the intro of this episode, I think, because I did a little poll and a few people wanted music back. So
You've been missing the music.
Yeah, I'll put the weird little fucking $5 tune I paid for back into the episode.
Why don't I try and magic something up with my fantastic keyboard skills?
Why don't you use I want you to do a kazoo. Version.
Oh yeah, I'm really good on the kazoo.
No, right. Yeah, if there's anything you want to see covered on the show, come and have a chat to me. I'm always open to suggestions. I'm not saying I'll get round to it immediately, but it's always nice to know what people are out. And yeah, look out for announcements coming via Instagram and this podcast for upcoming charity fundraiser events. Currently, there's going to be a charity live stream on Twitch, and then at some point, maybe June, July time, I'm going to put together, a D&D or a TTRPG session to play a game on stream with a few people, a couple of fans of the podcast, and see if we can get some donations while we're doing that, which I think would be nice. But yeah, apart from that, thank you for listening, and that's going to be a goodbye from me, Chris.
And goodbye from Rebecca.
Bye.
Bye.